I was already excited for this figure and was pleasantly surprised to find out that it can actually glow in the dark. So for the drink to go with it, I had to make one that, surprise, is also blacklight reactive. For this drink, you'll need a cucumber vodka, sake, blue curaçao, cream of coconut, and most importantly, tonic water. I say most importantly because it's the tonic water itself that reacts to the blacklight, or more specifically, the quinine within it. Obviously, the more tonic water, the better the glow, so I did trade some taste for appearance on this one. It's that same quinine that gives the tonic, and this drink as a whole, a surprisingly bitter taste. You'd expect it to be on the sweeter side with the coconut and blue curaçao, but you get more natural notes from those than sweetness when combined with the cucumber vodka and sake. If you're looking for a better -1 drink, check out my Minesweeper cocktail or the Martini Shots Atomic Breath cocktail. But if you're looking for something a little odd, try this one out. In a shaker, combine an ounce of cucumber vodka, an ounce of sake, a 1/4 ounce of blue curaçao, maybe a 1/4 ounce of cream of coconut. I use the squeezy stuff, so like a 3-inch squeeze. It's a horrible way to describe it, I'm so sorry. Then shake it all up. Pour that over ice, and top it with about 4 ounces of tonic water. Blast it with your blacklight, and enjoy. Cheers! When Super7 first added Godzilla characters to their Ultimates line, they put out figures in pairs. Godzilla 89 and Rose Biollante, Burning and Mechagodzilla, Meltdown and Destroya, Space and Mogira. Then they started doing solo figures, and their most recent additions are all repaints. The Hawaiian Shogun, Blazing Godzilla 95, Poster Space Godzilla, Heat Ray 89, minus color. On top of no new figures announced, I was worried that this might be the end of the Godzilla Ultimates. But 1. Super7 loves to just surprise us with random things, so I would not be shocked in the least if they announced a brand new wave of new sculpts. And 2. This charging -1 is a great sign for the direction of this toy line. I mean, I was super happy with it until I put it under the microscope for this review. Now don't get me wrong, I'm still happy with it, but just a little less so. Put up for pre-order at multiple retailers in November 2024, I ordered mine from the US Godzilla store since they were offering free shipping at the time and it was $1 less than the Super7 website for some reason. But joke's on me, it was still up for order on the Super7 site when they started offering free shipping, and theirs shipped out weeks before the Godzilla store. I have more time than money, so I'm still happy to have saved that $1. For the packaging, it's the exact same shape and size as the other Godzillas, except this one comes without the slipcover, which is just fine by me, but if you're a stickler for consistency, then I don't know what to tell you. This is also the same packaging art design as the minus color version, just obviously with color, specifically the blue on the fins. The Godzilla image itself appears to still be monochrome. I do like the addition of the window on top. If you like to display yours in box, that adds some extra displayability in lieu of the slipcover. For me, I'm taking everything out. And by everything, I mean the main body, tail, and swappable head. I know some folks were lamenting the lack of a beam effect part with this set, but Super7 got away with it by making it the charging version as opposed to a heat ray version. Very clever, and we'll come back to that one. Right now, we just have an extra head with a closed mouth. Why they choose to do extra heads as opposed to jaw articulation is beyond me, especially when they prove that they can do it with their Godzilla skull. I'll take articulated jaws all day, every day. Despite all the Ultimates having removable heads, the ball joints are different sizes, so you either can't swap the heads at all, or you're going to have a tiny ball joint and a large socket that's just going to fall right off. I don't know why you'd want to swap these heads anyway, but I'm not going to tell you how to display your figures. The open mouth head, or at least part of it, is cast in the same glow-in-the-dark material as the dorsals, and that glow is nice. I'm happy with this head, and I'll probably not even use the other head, especially with that blue paint splatter. Should be super easy to paint over, but I shouldn't have to, you know? That said, I will show you how to swap them out. They're on ball joints, so they should just pop on and off, but I recommend heating up the head a bit. Either way, definitely easier than getting the tail on, my god. Right out of the box, the tail was not going to just plug right in. Hearing that some copies of the first release had loose tails, I didn't want to force the tail in. The tail has a double ball joint or barbell joint at the end there, and the end inside the tail seems more or less permanent to me. There is a tiny bit of wiggle that hopefully you can see if I zoom in here. The end that we can see, and probably both ends for that matter, has these little nubs. I'm afraid that if I force this joint in, it may shred the nubs or crack the plug, so time to bust out the hairdryer. This took a few rounds with various heat settings, but after a minute on high, I was able to get it in. I couldn't fully grip the tail as I didn't want to stab myself with these spikes. This is a very stabby figure. These dorsal spikes do have some give to them, but I also have no doubt that these would go right through my skin. I mean, they do feel more malleable than the Monster Arts, and the fact that one was bent out of the box and not cracked or broken off, especially as it was in transit in the middle of a Washington winter, makes me feel a lot better about these. But also, please be careful with them. Now, they could have just painted the normal dorsals blue or cast them in a blue material and called it a day. But then they added this darker blue wash to them to help bring out some of the details. It's subtle and could be much stronger, but it's there. But then they added the spray, which I super appreciate. Really helps sell the whole glowing effect. It would have been nice if they kept that spray going up the back of the neck instead of suddenly stopping, but it's still nice. But then they actually reworked the dorsals to make them extended. Not even the Monster Arts did that. Seriously, it's my understanding that the Monster Arts just has repainted spines. And before you go into the comments like, hey dummy, the Monster Arts wouldn't have extended dorsals because it's the heat ray version and the dorsals get hammered back in when he fires its breath. I know that, but I just like the extended dorsal look. So not only did they outdo Monster Arts in that regard, but they made them glow. And it's a nice glow too. Just a quick pass with blacklight works great, so I'm curious to see what they'll look like after a full day of charging. Also, yeah, I just noticed the broken piece here, and looking back on the footage, I can see that it was broken like that from the get-go, right out of the package. How does that even happen? The good news is that it kind of works perfectly with how this guy looks. I'm not excusing the breakage, but I mean, the -1 design as a whole is such a carefully crafted mess of craggy detailing that little broken bits like this, especially if painted to match, could blend right in. I'm surprised that it was a piece on the body and not one of the dorsals, thank goodness. So finally, here we have the monster in all its glory. The height all depends on how you have it posed, but I can get mine roaring up at 8.5 inches tall. Now, I can imagine the gripes. The sculpt and paint aren't as solid as an X+, or the articulation has nothing on the Monster Arts, or at the price maybe it should have come with a heat ray. But for me, for the price, it's what I'm looking for. I had the first release of the Monster Arts, and I really did like that figure. But the dorsals were too fragile for my taste, and I know they arrived broken for some folks. If that figure fell off a shelf, there's no doubt in my mind that those dorsals would have been obliterated. I had a feeling that a heat ray version was inevitable, and I liked the idea of not only having that coloration, but having extended dorsals as well. The final nail in the coffin for that figure was the price that it was commanding on the aftermarket. I was happy to undercut the eBay prices to give someone a better deal and still make a few bucks in the process. And lo and behold, we did get a heat ray version, but as some limited event exclusive figure. What was the deal with that? I love that it came with a mini Shinden, and the breath effect is cool too, but none of that is worth 3 times the cost of an Ultimates to me. Plus, the dorsals aren't even extended. So when they announced this one, I was all in. And I'm glad I got it. The last Ultimates I got was the poster color Space Godzilla, which is a sculpt I like, and a tug on my nostalgia that I couldn't resist. But the hands fall off in the hallway when you're simply bringing it to the table, and the uselessly articulated tail takes up your whole shelf. And you know what? Let's start the articulation there. The tail features 7 ball joints every 2 segments, whereas the Monster Arts had joints between every segment. The first chunk is curved, but the rest of the segment chunks are straight out. The tail can curl up, but mostly in the first half here, mostly due to the dorsals blocking any more movement. It can also curl down, but mostly in the last half. So with those 2 halves combined, you can get something like this S-curve here, which is what I wish we had with their earlier Godzillas. You also get some twisting and some side to side. The tail is heavy. I mean, the whole thing is heavy, weighing in at 1 pound 9.4 ounces, so I can't get it to balance with the tail off the ground. Moving on up, we have the legs. The hips can't do a full 360, but thanks to the big gap around here, there is some wiggle room with that ball joint. There's pretty much no gap in the front, but it gets bigger as you move towards the back. There is a hinge and swivel at the knees, and a hinge with some twisting at the ankles. Even though the toes aren't articulated like the Monster Arts, the ankle has a nice enough range to make the knee joints well worth it. Now the torso is interesting. It's smooth and easy to move back and forth, but it's not loose as it can hold a pose just fine. Front and back, side to side, this whole thing, just be careful with the dorsals back there. But it does get weird when you try to twist it. It really doesn't want to. Not that you can't, but it seems to pop back. So if you want it in a specific twisted pose, you gotta move it a little bit past where you want it. But otherwise, it has a nice crunch down and can straighten up as well. The ball joints at the top and bottom of the neck have a full 360 rotation. The joint by the head is tighter than the one at the base of the neck, but it has a nice enough downward range to help with that hunched charging pose. I wish it could look up. That's one of the great things about the Monster Arts is that it could look up. I mean, not straight up, but up enough to get into a swimming pose. This Super 7 cannot. Finally, the arms. The shoulder has a hinge with a 360 swivel. There's less of a gap here than with the hips, which leads to the shoulder scraping against the inside of the socket. Unfortunately, that scrapes off the paint, revealing blue underneath, so it must be gang molded with the dorsals. Then you have a full rotation at the bicep, 360 swivel and hinge at the elbow, and some stabby hands. The wrist has a full swivel with a hinge, but good luck posing those hands because those fingers are sharp. Now, as far as the body paint goes, I was going to gloss right over this because whatever you see in the footage here is pretty much what you get, but I realize I should mention exactly that, the gloss. It's basically on par with the Monster Arts in that it's a greenish-brownish dry brushing, and some parts are a little more heavily painted than others because they're each made in a different part of the factory assembly line. But otherwise, I mean, it's nothing to complain about, and it's nothing to really write home about. It is what it is. Now, what's interesting about the paint, and I can't imagine they planned this, is that it appears orange under the black light. I don't know why, so there's that. The more I look back at my review of the Monster Arts, the more I do miss some aspects of it, like the ability to pop off the lower jaw and rest that on the neck because I'm a monster, but however much I may miss some of those things, I have too little space and too few funds to justify owning both figures at this time. Oftentimes with collecting, budget takes precedent, so Ultimates takes the win here. That is, of course, until we get something more budget-friendly like a Haya -1, and then their inevitable repaint with glowing spines, and then their re-release with translucent spines, and then their re-release with extended spines. I mean, we do have the $25 action figure from Bandai Namco, but I'm happy to pay triple the price for this Ultimates. Now, if you were to tell me after the first wave of the Ultimates line that I'd be selling off Monster Arts in favor of an Ultimates figure, I'd have laughed at you, but I've done it twice now. As I'm frequently analyzing my collecting habits, I've noticed some interesting cycles. One of those is that a new movie comes out, I buy a bunch of figures of the new Godzilla design even though it really isn't my favorite, and then I slowly sell them off over the next few years. It's been happening pretty consistently since Shin Godzilla, so with -1, I told myself not to get too sucked into that and only get figures that really stand out to me. And if you're going, really, an Ultimates is a standout -1 for you? Yes it is. But whatever -1 figure you prefer, there's always a cocktail you can make to go with it. Otherwise, thanks for watching, good luck hunting down whatever -1 is on your radar, and remember to always drink responsibly.